So first, I just want to thank everybody here at HAHS, all the supporters, Valerie especially for what she's done to bring me here, and all the people that I've met throughout the last couple of days. It's been amazing to share your stories, hear about your sites, and learn from what you have done and the challenges that you face. So I just want to say thank you and how wonderful it has been to be here. So let me find the clicker. So to fully understand the home and studio that was created, one must fully understand its creator, Dorothy Riester. She was born in 1916 on Thanksgiving Day in a lovely hilly and wooded area several miles north of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to parents who gave the breadth and width to explore her creativity and fostered a true appreciation for the natural world around her. She enrolled in Carnegie Tech, which is now Carnegie Mellon, and she eschewed the traditional path of women artists at her time, instead exploring her interest in creating the spatial relationships of objects in welded steel. Dorothy was a self-described right-brain thinker, a creator, and a teacher of, quote, multi-dimensional art, metal sculpture, clay, wood, floral arrangements, and so-called compost art, or outdoor sculptures that might deteriorate over time. Her teaching career continued at Syracuse University and afterwards to Cazenovia College. It was in these roles in this part of the world that Dorothy interacted with such influential artists as Ivan Meistervik and created her most influential and far-reaching work. She hit her stride in large-scale sculptures of welded steel, cast concrete, cast bronze, and delved back into her love of ceramics. She became instrumental in the ceramics program at the Everson Museum, as well as its operation, being influential in the decision to bring on I.M. Pei as the architect. It was his first museum, so it's a pretty big deal. So this was her era of significance, and she chose to live out in the Cazenovia area instead of staying out in the Syracuse, more urban area, and in a couple slides you'll see exactly why. Her work can be found at the Everson Museum, the National Abolition Museum, and multiple private collections. Her husband Bob was an engineer and at one point VP of Carrier in Syracuse. If you don't know what Carrier is, if you have an air conditioner, they did that amongst much larger scale things. Their partnership thrived on creation and problem solving and was, in a true sense of the word, a partnership. They worked together. Dorothy passed away at the age of 100 just over a year ago in 2017. So her death is still very new to us, and her legacy while living was already very long. Her death marks a new era for the park, one that is not guided by her direct voice, and we find ourselves in a time of figuring out what this means and how we begin to interpret the life and creation of this artist. I want to liken this to Thayer's presentation the other day when she talked about a living memorial and how sites can be approached in this way, and I wanted to say that talk really touched home for me. It works great. I'm always plagued by technical issues, so it's always a good thing. So in this site, the land. Why Dorothy and her husband settled in Cazenovia. As you can see, the landscape here, if you haven't heard of Cazenovia or Stone Quarry Hill Art Park, I am not offended. Cazenovia, to give you some context, is right outside of Syracuse, New York, off of historic Route 20 in the hills above Cazenovia, with 360 view sheds of lakes, hills, valleys, and farms. It is really a true bucolic paradise there. And you can see why, after growing up in the rural Pennsylvania area, her initial influence from the natural world around her really influenced the type of art that she wanted to do. They originally purchased in about 1956 to 1958, as advertised on a sign on the side of the road, 23 acres, scenic, Cazenovia. Really a lot of description there. But she bought it sight unseen and Bob unseen, and which was quite her way, and over time purchased more acreage that reconstructed a historic farmstead and quarry, 104 acres in total. Now, they did not just build upon the site immediately. They took the time to live 3 different seasons, and if you know upstate New York, 3 seasons usually is winter. And they lived in pop-up campers and tents throughout the grounds of those 23 acres to find the perfect spot for her and her husband to build their seasonal house and studio for her to work in and be inspired by the nature around her. So the land was used to showcase her sculptures and the sculptures of her contemporaries. As you can see in that photo, there's a few there, but we have about 80 sculptures currently on site throughout the 4 miles of trails that we have. So So sculptors like Roger Mack are exhibited on site as well as in the house. And she used it as a platform for emerging artists and encouraged them to create site-specific, nature-inspired, or nature-reactive pieces within the environment for people to enjoy. Now, they did not just live there and have it as a private residence. In 1991, while still living on site for 2 more decades, pretty much, they incorporated the 104 acres as a park, private, but open to the public. It was a 501(c) managed by a board, but they were very involved and living smack dab, pretty much in the middle on top of the hill. So when people came, they were able to interact with them, which Dorothy was famed for doing. And growing up in the area, I remember going to crafting events and camp events on site and seeing Dorothy and being able to interact with the nature. Most of the work that we created in these camps were nature inspired from the landscape. So this is the house in the A-frame studio. Though framed out by a local contractor, Dorothy and her husband created the rest of the house. So this is the hilltop house. When I say the hilltop, that'll give you a little bit of idea what I'm talking about. They started in 1959, and it was initially designed as a seasonal home for the Riesters. Dorothy built the iconic A-frame studio in 1962, strategically placed with nature and landscape in mind and the views that it encompassed. With construction of the road and winterizing the home in 1965, expanding the footprint became possible. In addition to the A-frame studio, she added an art barn directly connected to it in 1970. Other structures, such as a gallery, maintenance shed, and a caretaker's house and artist lodge, were built through the 80s and 90s to accommodate her growing needs and interests. Her artistic influence and design is not just evident on the walls in the studio, but in the structure of the house itself. She installed tiles, welded handrails and beams, sculpted literally into the walls, and I have a slide of it, and I'll probably go on a tangent about that. There was not just a space that she lived and worked in, a singular. This building she made, and it was as much a sculptural work of art as her freestanding pieces. The artist and house and land cannot be separated. One created the other and is much a part of the catalog of her work and artistic process as any of the art, sketchbooks, and models within. The house and studio, an original 23 acres, is on the National Register for Historic Places, mainly as its architectural contribution. Cazenovia is a very traditionally historic town, and so having the, modern house cousin on top of the hill overlooking it is quite a dichotomy between the rest of the historic resources in the area. So now I want to talk about one of my favorite things, which is the inside of the hilltop house. It serves as an extension of her artistic practice. As I said, they only had the building shelled out. They did everything else on their own. And you can see her skills were imbued in the walls. She made those tiles, welded the hood range. They did that floating staircase. The floor that you see, they installed themselves. The lights, pretty much everything you see here is the wall that she literally sculpted. There's organic matter, metals, shards of pottery, everything within it. And then the library, which I could go on itself for over hours talking about, but I won't because I have some other things to get to. So here are some more photographs. There's the sandcast wall that undulates out into a sandcast fireplace that she did herself, and this is the 3rd iteration. The first 2 were not as big of successes, but Dorothy couldn't stop herself from continuing to go. We have a theme here of Lincoln. Here's her standing Lincoln, which she did at 9 feet tall, which is at the Abolition Museum. And so these next couple images are to give a bit of context in the fact that Dorothy did not work in a singular space. Yes, she created in her studio, in her house. This is her with her materials. This is her making some of the maquettes, but you can see the view in the background of it from her studio and from the grounds. But she created a raku pit when she got reinterested back in her ceramic practice. But then on the ground, she would literally take the organic material around her and create what she wanted where she wanted. So this is her tree nest. You can see the hill in the background that goes up towards the artist lodge and studio. So everywhere was her laboratory. Anything that could be art was. She was famous for finding organic material and creating sculptures or incorporating them into her sculptures. So where she created was anywhere, and what she created was out of anything she found. So how do we interpret this? This is a snow drawing. We had artist Sonia Hirschkig, I'm mispronouncing that, I apologize, which She is an international artist who came and leading members of the community on snowshoeing these spirals throughout the landscape, using the landscape as the actual canvas. So it actually integrated art and nature in a very interesting and interactive and playful way, which we've done for a few seasons. This is artist Ed Rilhowski. He's a sound artist. He came out over a couple summers recording the ponds above and below, recording the sounds of the insects. Oh, thank you. And also playing the sculptures. He took percussion mallets and would play some of the metal sculptures throughout it, and he would create compositions. And some of the ones that he created were called pond songs, which then he installed the audio in our gallery, as well as photos of the organic and flora and fauna of the area that he recorded in. He then invited the public to come in and draw their reaction to what they heard in his sounds and add it to his installation. So again, bringing the art and nature, bringing the outdoors and indoors, and constantly having that playful, community-focused effort with the artist to come in, interpreting her land and her art all in one. Let's see if it... Okay, so there are some technical difficulties that we were not expecting, so now you just have to hear me talk a bit about what else we do. So as a long-standing tradition, there was a photo of our annual Kite Fest, which was begun by Dorothy Riester, and she called it Art in the Skies, and invited, again, the public to come up, create their own kites, as well as professional kiters, if I'm not sure if that's a professional term, but they created these almost kite sculptures that they flew on the hilltop with the striking blue sky and the hills in the background, creating sky art. And it's ongoing. We are going to have it next month, barring bad weather. Hopefully it will be warm enough. And then there was another picture there that was a scale model that we have artist Jim Ridlon Jr. doing. He is building this interactive, tall 20-foot by 20-foot cube that he's calling a forest of flowers, or eclipse, which he is inviting the public into his studio practice by having us post weekly installments and chronicling this behind the scenes in the artist's mind, breaking that barrier, as Dorothy often did, of the artist on a pedestal versus the artist as with their own insecurities in their creation, and inviting the public to come in and contribute to it. Because at the end of it, as part of a tradition his father started last year, Jim Ridlon Sr., who is a professional football player and artist in his own right, we have a fiery fundraiser where, like a funeral pyre, we burn the work. And so he's chronicling from the birth to literally the death of this sculpture and involving the community within it. So again, it's that really interesting way of basing something within nature and bringing the community in, as Dorothy and Bob always did, to explore and learn from it. So then we also have an Artist in Residence program, which we call SQUARE, Stone Quarry Artist in Residence. And we have, the residency program has been longstanding at the art park, but it's been not as formalized. And so over this winter, I formalized the program. And in this new iteration, we are having 4 different artists of different media come in, live on site together for 5 weeks at the Artist Lodge, and create in the art barn on the grounds. We have 2 sculptors, a photographer and a multimedia artist who is going to be a time shot, like a snapshot time capsule of the art park at one time to then bury on site, and a poet who works with natural imagery for her poetry. And though they don't have any, we're not asking for them to have a definite end product, I will be working with them personally about how they interact with the public to, again, create the community dialogue that was so important in touching on land, art, and nature. And we did have another winter event where we had, they're called Swedish snow lanterns. You take snowballs and you kind of build a little pyramid and I had a picture of it, but look it up, Swedish snow lanterns. And you put a candle within it, and we invited the public to come up and fill one of the hillsides, again creating that impermanence in the art, that light and land sculpture that is bringing the community there to create playfully in Dorothy's, in kind of her canon and her way that she created. So again, since he passed away, her voice is not where, we don't have that guiding voice from her as we did for that very long period of time for, since 1991, we are now entering a new era where it is up to us to interpret what she wants. And so trying to keep that playfulness and try to activate the land, the art. We have a pottery fest that they come in, they can see the house and the stuff that she made, as well as fire their own raku pottery. So you can kind of get that direct influence of seeing her work, sculptural, steel, ceramics, all of that, and the land that she curated herself in a way, and be inspired and create and be encouraged to create from it as a lasting part of her legacy. I want to end with a quote from a board member from a while ago, Dr. Edward Ankin. Dorothy's profound relationship with nature fits well within a practice set by such great American naturalists as Henry David Thoreau. But unlike Thoreau, who spent slightly more than 2 years at Walden Pond, Dorothy has spent more than 60 years at Stone Quarry, before American artists of the late 60s and early 70s rediscovered the relationship between art and nature. Dorothy was already well into her adventure of making Stone Quarry into a special place where the distinction between art and nature evaporates. And to elaborate more on this, I'd like to say that Dorothy also blurred the lines between art and architecture, design and decor, sculpture and structure, home and studio, and art in her life. So I've switched to my thank you slide, but I don't have one. So thank you, everybody, for bearing with me.